Make your business stand out in the best way with signage from Image 360. Image 360 combines the latest production technology, materials, and years of expertise to deliver you the best visual resources for your brand. From storefront signs to vehicle graphics and more. Learn more and get a quote today at image360signs.com. That's image, the number 360, signs.com. Image 360, your expert source for comprehensive custom signage and graphic solutions.
Wait, who are all these people?
Oh, these are the electors. They're the people who actually vote for president.
My name is Richard Dix, and this is How Did That Happen? A podcast where I look at everyday things or events and try to figure out how they came to be. Every week I will research one topic, and by the end of the episode, I hope to truly have the answer to the question, how did that happen? All right, welcome back to another episode of How Did That Happen? HDTH, I believe this week's episode, number 66? We are talking about the Electoral College, and boy, is it dense. We're going to get into all of that. I'm even going to tell you, we talk about political parties as well. I'm going to give you a little bit of history on that. I tell you where we get the donkey and the elephant, but I definitely try to really break it down and explain to you guys what's happening with the Electoral College, because I've always wondered. So this was definitely research that I enjoy doing. But before we get to that, as always, a little bit of housekeeping here. What am I watching? Here? Let's see. I'm watching Jailbirds on Netflix. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this yet, but it's I love jail shows. If you love jail shows, you will love this show. It's part reality show, part love show, and part jail show. It's all three. It's mind blowing when you really see it. I'm not even sure how they really do it. I mean, the Netflix just gets in there, man. Like it is all the things that I said, but it's set in a Sacramento jail in California, where inmates are awaiting their sentencing for trial, or just kind of serving out some small sentences. It's not an actual real prison, which gives it a whole different feel. And while they wait, Netflix is following their lives, and they do. It's like a little but like the romance part is that they all talk through the toilet, and like they empty out all the water in the toilet, and then talk to other people, like men and women. So it's like it's a men and women jail, so the men and women can talk to each other, and they create these little like love. I don't know what you call them, but it is beyond interesting. I will say the first season is much better than the second season. The second season they go to New Orleans, which you think would be cool. I don't know. Maybe need to watch it again. I wasn't loving it, but the first season when they're in Sacramento is awesome. Let's see. What am I listening to? I've mentioned a lot of podcasts on here. I'm just going to keep throwing them at you guys because, I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I've always said if you want to have your podcast read on here, you can drop it in the Twitter, and I'll let people know to come check your stuff out. But what we have today is Endless Honeymoon with Moshe Kasher and Natasha Leggero, which is really funny. These guys are really funny. I was a fan of the Natasha before I ever heard of Moshe, but they're actually, like I said, they're married, and Moshe's really funny too. They also have a kid. It's a dating and a relationship podcast, but they kind of delve into all different types of life. But it's mainly that's like the main foundation of it. And they kind of just ask questions. People will kind of write in questions. They'll try to kind of give them advice, and they have a really good stand up. I think it's on Netflix. I'm not sure. Where they do this on the road. Like they'll bring people up on stage and like just kind of delve into their relationship problems and life and stuff. And they're actually really insightful. So definitely check that out. It's called Endless Honeymoon. It is really funny. And as always, 7 days a week, you can find out how things happen over at hdthappen.com. As always, you'll find episode transcripts there, photos and videos if they are applicable to the episode. There's also a blog on there written by yours truly. I've written on subjects like the Uvalde shooting, Takeoff's murder, which has been a while now, loneliness, and even suicide. I try to cover all the bases. I've written about my relationship, problems in there, just a way to kind of open up about myself and to let people, kind of know they're not alone if they're struggling through different things. But yeah, it's definitely up there. Check it out if you want to. As always, there is a mini-sode that comes out every Thursday at 4:30 a.m. I think we're really getting into the meat of what that is. I think that's really going to be. I was surprised when I first started that podcast or that podcast. I mean, I guess it's a separate podcast, but it is a mini-sode, which is a totally different show, I guess. It's been about 5 months now. We started Bite Size Bios in October. And I wasn't really sure where I was going to go, but I always like the idea of podcasts that have a mini-sode. I feel like when you cover as much stuff as we do, it's nice to go back and talk about it every now and then, and just kind of recover. Because things get lost, things get not mentioned or not described or explained correctly. But that's why I like to have that. But now we've really gotten into some different people, and I hope we can continue to kind of profile. And we found out a lot of different things, man. We found out a lot of different things. I mean, we found out. I mean, just Marlon Brando alone, and it wasn't even, some of the stuff wasn't even on his episode. But you find out that his son shot a dude in the face while he was there, and then his daughter committed suicide because she lied. Or not because, but right after, within 5 years of that happening, with more than likely because she lied about the abuse that wasn't happening, which is the reason why his son-in-law shot, which was the reason why his son shot his son-in-law. Crazy stuff. And then you find out this guy was having sex with Richard Pryor as well. It's like we're uncovering all this on Bite Size Bios every Thursday at 4:30 a.m. Definitely tune in. Like and subscribe wherever you're hearing this. Definitely. I would always appreciate it. It actually does help us move up. So wherever you guys are listening to this, just drop a comment in there. Drop a 5 stars if you like it, 2 stars if you didn't like it, and if you want to tell us why you didn't like it, that's even better. Constructive criticism is always welcome. I'm not sure if there's much else to say before we get on to the getting on. No, I don't think there is. So without further ado, as we know to do, here is the episode. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the Electoral College. We're going to get all up in it. So before we get into the history of it, which is sometimes I kind of flip it and do the history first, I'm going to explain what the Electoral College is for those who may not know and how it works. And then we'll get into where it came from, the vis-a-vis how did that happen. So the Electoral College is a group of intermediaries designated by the Constitution to select the President and Vice President of the United States. Each of the 50 states is allocated presidential electors equal to the number of its representatives and senators, and that becomes a big thing. We'll get to that later. The ratification of the 23rd Amendment in 1961 allowed citizens in D.C., the District of Columbia, to participate in presidential elections as well. They have consistently had 3 electors ever since then. That's a big thing. That's crazy. 1961 was when the first time they ever got the ability to participate in the Electoral College, which had basically been a thing for the entire history of the country. The Constitution grants state legislatures the power to decide how they appoint their electors, and initially a number of state legislatures directly selected their electors, but during the 19th century they transitioned to the popular vote, which is now used by all 50 states, although they do kind of differ in how they handle them afterwards. So that basically means each state awards its electoral votes to the presidential candidates chosen by the state's voters. As I mentioned, 48 states and D.C. use what's called a winner-take-all system, where they award all of their electoral votes to the popular vote in the winning state. Maine and Nebraska want to be a little different. They do. It's a little. They award one electoral vote to the popular vote winner in each of their congressional districts, and the remaining 2 electoral votes go to the statewide winner. Under this system, those 2 states sometimes split their electoral votes among candidates. I don't know why we keep letting them do that. So that is just a quick overview of the Electoral College. We're gonna get, like I said, try to explain some more things, but I thought at least let's start from one kind of foundation of understanding. So that brings us to the beginnings of the Electoral College. The Constitutional Convention in 1787 used the Virginia Plan as the basis for discussions, as the kind of the first idea of the Electoral College, or how to elect a president. The Virginia Plan called for Congress to actually elect the president, and delegates from a majority of states agreed to this mode of election. But after it was debated for a while, they actually opposed the nomination by Congress because they thought it could violate the separation of powers, which is probably true. James Wilson then made a motion for electors for the purpose of choosing the president instead of actually being Congress. An election expert, William C. Kimberling, actually kind of explains it maybe a little bit better for some people who still don't quite get it. Quote, "The function of the College of the Electors in choosing the president can be likened to that in the Roman Catholic Church of the College of Cardinals selecting the Pope. The original idea was for the most knowledgeable and informed individuals from each state to select the president based solely on merit and without regard to state of origin or political party. So they really wanted to kind of take the idea, which is crazy when you think about it. We're fighting so hard for democracy just to be like, well, let's just pick the smartest guys in each state and let them pick the president. It's like was that what George Washington fought for? And so Article 2 of the Constitution, which established the executive branch of the federal government, outlined the framers' plan for electing the president and vice president. Under this plan, each elector would cast 2 votes for president. The candidate who received the most votes became the president, and the second place finisher became the vice president, which led to administrations which political opponents basically would be working in the same, office. So you'd have a president from one party and a vice president from another party. And I knew that before this, and it's pretty wild when you think about it. I mean, you fight so hard because you guys have different ideas of how the country should be run, and then you get all put together at the end because of how they wrote the laws up that says, well, you guys are both the most popular, so you guys have to kind of work together. And that's why the actual process was overhauled in 1804 with the ratification of the 12th Amendment, which required electors to cast votes separately for president and vice president. So basically, since 1804 on, we kind of have somewhat of what we have right now. Because there were a number of presidents, not many. I think there was only up until that point we only had 3 or 4. But a couple of those tickets had guys who were from opposing parties. It's kind of weird when you think about it. And so I actually have some examples of when there were 2 candidates from different parties who ended up on the same. I keep wanting to say ticket, but it's a ticket when it's the election. Afterwards, they ended up working together in the same presidency. We'll go with that. So in 1796, the Federalist Party candidate John Adams won the presidential election, and Thomas Jefferson, who was a Democratic Republican Party, he came in second. And so that was an instance in which we had 2 completely different guys who had completely different ideas about how to run the country, had to come together and become one, if you will. And Thomas Jefferson would, of course, go on to be the 3rd president of America. And there's even the very next election after when President Jefferson becomes President Jefferson, he only barely gets it. He runs against Aaron Burr, but Aaron Burr is in the same party as him, and so due to how the ballots are counted, every ballot that was cast for Thomas Jefferson also counted as a ballot cast for Aaron Burr. This stuff, you realize how they really had to get it together after a few years. We really have it seems crazy now, but it's a well-oiled machine compared to what we had 200 years ago. So that they end up with a tie. They're deadlocked, and so because of that, they had to go, and I believe it was the House that had the House of Representatives was the one who had to decide. And this is really where this will be the kind of the story that explains the ratification of the 12th Amendment in 1804. And this is where it gets a little tricky, is because the Federalist Party had already lost the national election for president. They were kind of salty and they're kind of in their feelings, you know what I mean? So when it came down to them trying to decide the president, who was basically one of the 2 guys from the same party, they wanted to embarrass the opposition by having them actually vote to elect Burr instead of Thomas Jefferson. So they cast all their votes to tie it so they couldn't actually elect Thomas Jefferson to be president for a while, and then kept going back and forth. On the 36th ballot, Delaware's only representative, James A. Bayard, made it known that he intended to break the impasse for fear that failure to do so could endanger the future of the Union. And he's really probably right, because it's like, y'all keep fighting. You only had this is only your 3rd president, man. Y'all need to get some presidents under your belt before you start doing some crazy stuff like what we're doing these days. Bayard, I think I hope that's how you say it. It's just Bayard. It's probably Bayard, but I like to put some oomph on it. Those guys and other Federalists from South Carolina, Maryland, and Vermont, they were the ones who were successful in actually casting the votes to give Jefferson a majority, which allowed him to become the 3rd president. I said all of that to say that once that happened, Congress realized they had to fix some issues with their elections. And so on December the 9th of 1803, they ratified the 12th Amendment, and starting with the 1804 election, it was required that electors cast separate ballots for president and vice president. And that replaced the system that was outlined in the Article 2, Section 1, Clause 3. But it's interesting to note that the framers of the Constitution didn't really want or anticipate political parties. And it's true in George Washington's farewell address in 1796, he included an urgent appeal to avert such parties. He was telling them that you guys really don't need to be doing that. They never really had the idea that candidates would be running for president either. But within, a few years of the Constitution becoming ratified, both of those things were just very permanent fixtures in American politics. All right. And we've covered a lot of ground in the last 10 to 15 minutes. I want to take a second to take a breath and breathe in and breathe out before we head back into some more dense topics. I definitely did this podcast or started this podcast to get into stuff like this, and I'm still trying to find a through way to make it the most palatable and to try to get out the most important information that I can find. But yeah, so we've talked about basically what the Electoral College is. We've talked about some different instances in which the early elections in American history kind of shaped what we have now. Another part that I do feel is worth mentioning, and actually more important than what I initially thought before I went into this, was the 3/5 clause in the Constitution, which basically it explains that the southern states, who were the slave-owning states mostly in America during that time, they were able to, in counting all the people in their population during the census, they would count the slaves as 3/5 of a person, which in itself already sounds horrific. But what really happened is it ended up giving the southern Congress members more voting power and more power in the national election, because basically the southern and American, or excuse me, not American, the southern and northern sides had about equal population, but as far as then you had the slaves into it for the people in the South, it gave them a larger population, which then gave them more electorates, which gave them a larger voice in the elections. I thought that was very interesting. I never really thought about that, how that would affect. And so basically, say because of the considerable non-voting slave population, the region would have less clout under a popular vote system. So basically, if they just made it so how it was, every vote counts for whatever candidate, the South would not be as powerful as they actually were. And so during that time, I think there was said 93% of the country's slaves were in just 5 southern states. And so that basically they became the beneficiary of this compromise, and they increased the size of the South's congressional delegation by 42% just by counting their slaves. And so this is actually what gets them their seats in Congress. And so when they come to try to figure out how we're going to make an electorate system for the entire country, they just take.
With Miller Mott College's online programs, you can choose when you study. Our online programs give you the flexibility to make education work with your schedule. Earn your degree without derailing your life. Visit us online at miller-mott.edu. That's miller-mott.edu.
This system and apply it to the Electoral College system. So it's not to, super hot take here, but it seems like the Electoral College is somewhat rooted in racism. But I mean, it's America, so like, what isn't? So when you think about it. I had a funny, I don't know if this is worth mentioning, where I was talking to some people the other night, and I was saying, I wish, not that I wish, but all the names that they use in replacement of, like all the Native American mascots and stuff for sports, they're just not as good. They're just not as good. This is just a tangent real fast to get it off my chest, but I mean, the Washington Commanders, it doesn't sound as good as the Washington Redskins. I know, I hear it. And then like the Cleveland Indians, the Cleveland Guardians, it's just like, if we have to change it, can we actually change it to something cool? Sorry, I don't know why that just came into my head right now, but I figured I'd get it off my chest while I have the chance. Back to the Electoral College. Now we're going to talk about what it takes to be an elector, what qualifications that it is to be in the Electoral College. And we've mentioned on a previous BSB when we did Hillary Clinton, I mentioned at the end that she herself actually is an electorate, or is that what they call him? I think that's what they call him, or elector for the state of New York. So she falls within all the qualifications that I'm about to list, which I will mention before are not many. The U.S. Constitution contains very few provisions relating to the qualifications of electors. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 provides that no senator or representative or person holding an office or trust or profit under the United States shall be appointed an elector. So you can't be holding any office of some sort or have any sort of, financial interest in the country at all, which is probably a good thing. As a historical point, the 14th Amendment provides that state officials who have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States or given aid and comfort to its enemies are disqualified from serving as electors. This actually does relate to post-Civil War stuff, so really it doesn't actually have anything to do with the Civil War that happened, but it has everything to do with anything that happened after the fact. So each state will have what's called a certificate of ascertainment, and it confirms the names of all their appointed electors, and that's pretty much all you need. And so you can't hold office, you can't have any financial interests that involve America, you can't have gone against America in any way, and then you get your name on a certificate, and boom, you can elect the president, son. That's all you need to do to get that done. And since we're talking about these electors, another interesting part, because this is the part, I mean, honestly, because they teach you politics in school, social studies and civics and all that good stuff, and you learn. And I think before that, I mean, maybe if you're from a household that is a little more involved, you maybe knew this before, but I didn't really understand how elections worked until I went to school. My parents vote, and they voted, and they probably, but it wasn't like a civics class at home when I went home. So when you learn this stuff, and you realize, oh, so I vote, but then my vote just goes into kind of a tally, and then the amount of votes just get pushed over to this one person who then gets to choose who they want to pick, which is truthfully how it actually works. The people who are the electors are not bound by any constitutional right or any rule to vote for who you tell them to vote for. And that's kind of what I'm going to cover right here, right now. They're called faithless electors, basically. Ever since the 19th century, states have expected their electors to honor the will of the voters. You would think so, right? In other words, electors are now pledged to vote for the winner of the popular vote in their state. That's what you think would happen. However, the Constitution does not require them to do so, which blowing my mind, which allows for scenarios in which faithless electors have voted against the popular vote and winners of their states. Since 2016, or not since, but as of 2016, so all the way up, I guess, until 2016, there have been 90 faithless electoral votes that have been cast out of the 23,000 in total across presidential elections. And in the 2016 presidential election, there was a record-breaking 7 faithless electors, including 3 who voted for Secretary of State Colin Powell, God rest his soul, who was not even a presidential candidate at the time. So these guys are just going rogue. It's crazy when you think about it. So you vote, you put your vote out there, and these guys just choose to vote for who they want to. That's crazy. I mean, 7. In 2016, there were 7 people who were just like, well, I feel differently. And I'm looking up the article right now that this is coming from. That's just got, because let's see if there's any more, see who else they may have voted for. And then we're going to get into the actual process of the actual, the vote count and what they do. Okay, and so there's I said what? 3 of them voted for Colin Powell. One of them, his name was Robert Satiacum. Robert S. He voted for Faith Spotted Eagle, which at first I was like, this dude voted for an animal. He did not. He voted for a woman who's a member of the Sioux Nation, the Yankton Sioux Nation. But it's just like, come on, man! Like you can't use your vote to vote for like the crazy, not crazy, but like crazy in the sense that they'll never win. Not that their views are crazy, but crazy in the sense of it's a statistical like impossibility that your vote will actually count in any way, shape, or form. You're just wasting the people's votes who entrusted you with their vote. But yeah, I never knew that, so I'm just looking through it now. 2 of them came from Texas. They voted for completely different people. It's just like I didn't know, and I'm wondering. I mean, how many people didn't? There should be. I don't know. I'm not gonna get on my high horse here on my soapbox, but it's just it does make you feel like you're wasting the vote if you just get to vote for whoever you want. What's even the point of our vote then? Not me getting existential on the podcast. But yeah, so I mean, you heard it here. That's pretty wild. And so, like I said, so there's no constitutional law that says they have to, but there are currently 33 states and DC. They require their presidential electors to vote for who they're pledged. But the other what is that, 17 states. They're just like, fire at will, buddy, however you feel. And there are 5 states that impose a penalty on faithless electors. That's pretty cool. So there's a little bit of justice. So 5 states say, if you vote for who we didn't want you to vote for, you're gonna get penalized. And then there's 14 states that have, laws that can make for their faithless electors to be removed or for their votes to be canceled. So that'll bring us to the actual procedure for voting for the president if you're in the electoral college. And so since the mid 20th century, Congress has met in a joint session every 4 years on January 6th at 1 p.m. to tally the votes in the Electoral College. The sitting vice president presides over the meeting and opens the votes from each state in alphabetical order. That's interesting. He passes the votes to 4 tellers, 2 from the House and 2 from the Senate, who announce the results. House tellers include 1 representative from each party and are appointed by the Speaker. At the end of the account, the vice president then announces the name of the next president. And so that's pretty much been what it has been for, like they said, about the past 70 years. They ratified the 20th Amendment, I believe in 1937, which said that basically now they announced the new president in front of the newly sworn-in Congress that got elected the previous November. They've changed the date count numerous times throughout the year, so it's not always on January 6th. It was changed in 1957, 85, 89, 97, 2009, and 2013. And this is kind of sad, but I think they said a number of sitting vice presidents have announced that they lost their own bid for presidency. John C. Breckinridge, 1861. 100 years later, Richard Nixon, 1961, and then Al Gore also announced that he lost his bid for president, which has to be like the biggest insult to injury when you're just, you're the guy. It's like if you have to, like, I don't know, it's like calling your own fight and then having to also announce that you lost the fight too. It's like, that's rough. And that is how the Electoral College happened. And now it's time for the roundup. And we're going to round it up. The Electoral College was created by Congress and is written in the Constitution. It made use of the 3/5 clause to compose their delegation. Electors are not bound by constitutional law to vote for the candidate that their state selects. Things I didn't know before. And now I know them. Never heard of these things. What are they? All right, so for this things I didn't know before, I looked up a lot of different stuff about the different political parties that America has had throughout the years, because I didn't know much about it until I looked into it. I didn't realize that I guess the Democratic Party is considered the older party. They've been around since I think like the 1820s, depending on who you ask. When I was researching this, there is a lot of information on this, and you realize how much things have changed. The political landscape has changed throughout America in these last few hundred years. And so, yeah, I mean, the Democratic Party was started in the 1820s. They say the Republican Party, I believe, was started in the 1850s as an anti-slavery kind of party. And I will tell you how they both ended up getting their where we get the donkey and the elephant from. They're not crazy interesting stories, but it's crazy how they stick for so long. And of course, so the Republican Party got their elephant logo from a political cartoon drawn by a dude named Thomas Nast, who was drawing it for Harper's Weekly. And I saw the picture. It's just like, I'm not sure what the connotation is. The context. Excuse me. Let me see if I can find it here real fast. All right, pulled it up. Looking at it here, trying to get a understanding. So it's a huge elephant, and there's what is that? It's to be some sort of sheep-looking thing. It looks like a dog in a sheep's outfit, which is a weird thing to say. And it's got things like it's about reform. What else does it say? But yeah, so basically, I'm not sure why they chose to. Oh, there's a giraffe in here too. There's so many animals, and they picked the elephant. Okay. But yeah, and so the other one, the way that we got the donkey is actually from, I believe it was President Andrew Jackson. They called him a jackass, and he was like, "Yeah, that's me," and I'm so much of that I will now, I think he put up pictures of like donkeys and stuff. Yeah, he put donkeys on his campaign posters, and since he was a part of the Democratic Party, that kind of just became the thing, and that's why we even now 100 or 200 years later have an elephant and a donkey to symbolize our two-party system. But there have been some really interesting different names for parties. There was a party in the 1840s called the Know Nothings Party, and it was an immigration based party, and they kind of grew out of the nativist fears from millions of immigrants from Germany, Ireland, China, and other countries that were coming into America. They were worried about all these people that were kind of coming into their quote unquote native land. But the way they got their name was what people would ask about them, because they didn't want to be known. They would just reply, "I know nothing." You know what I mean? And that's kind of like, I guess, a little nod to being in the party. But yeah, they didn't last. The Federalists were also a different party. They didn't last. I think after the War of 1812, they kind of fizzled out. And there was actually, during that time, I didn't know this either. During that time in the War of right after the War of 1812, there was a time when there was only one party for like 12 years. There was maybe 3 elections. There was only one party. It was the Democratic Party, because they had been going against the Federalists for a while, and then the Federalists couldn't get it together, and it was just the Democrats for a little while. Like we said, the Republicans wouldn't come in for at least another 10 to 20 years. I figured out why. A lot of different things here that I see out in everyday life that I don't always understand, because I don't always look them up. I figured out why the GOP, what that even stands for, and where they got that from. The GOP stands for Grand Old Party. I would have never guessed it. And it really comes from back when an election in 1888, when the Republican Party won the presidency after there had been a Democratic president, which was like a big thing for them. The Chicago Tribune was quoted as saying, "Let us be thankful that under the rule of the Grand Old Party, these United States will resume the onward and upward march with the election of Grover Cleveland." And so it really comes from, the GOP comes from an 1888 Chicago Tribune article. Interesting. A lot of different little facts, little tidbits. You realize this stuff, it really, I like little nuggets like that. So the first third party in America was the Anti-Masonic Party, and obviously, as it says in their name, they were created out of the opposition to the Freemason movement. And I don't know if I have much else. That was just a couple little tidbits about political parties. I find that stuff interesting. I hope you guys find that stuff interesting. All right, that was another episode of How Did That Happen? HDTH learned a lot about the Electoral College. I did not know most of that before going in here. I think the most that I knew was that there was somebody that, that there was an Electoral College, there were these electors. Like I said, we talked about before, that Hillary Clinton is one, so you kind of knew that. But as far as the entire process and just all of that, that was new to me. And maybe it was new to you too. Hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, if you love what you just heard here, there's more where that came from over at hdthappen.com. You will always find a written version of what you just heard, as well as photos and videos that go along with the episode. Like and subscribe wherever you heard this. Always helps for the comments and the likes. It definitely helps the podcast grow a little bit. As always, the goal here is still to get to top 100 history podcasts on Apple Podcasts. That was the goal last year. It is the goal this year. Will be the goal next year as well. So yeah, give us 5 stars wherever you can. 2 stars if you didn't want to give us 5 stars, and tell us why. That'd be great, because constructive criticism is always welcome. I don't think there's much else to say before we get out of here. Always appreciate the people that come back week to week and press play. I think that's it. We'll see you in a couple days with the next BSB.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Okay, round two. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.